Views expressed in this podcast are solely those of the participants. The hosts make no claim to be literary experts, and their opinions are exactly that, opinions. All creative works discussed or reviewed are the intellectual property of the creators of said stories and is being used under the fair use doctrine.
Of Swords and Soulmates, a podcast where we discuss romantasy stories. I'm one of your hosts, Mari, and with me I have Kelly.
Hey, it's Kelly. And we also have Ashley.
Hey guys, it's Ashley. We also have Jonathan.
Hey, it's JP at the back of the pack. What's good?
One of these days I'm going to just throw you under the bus, Jonathan, and have you be like first or second, and you're not going to know what to do.
He's not going to know what to do if you mess up the order.
If you think that I haven't planned for that contingency, you are mistaken. It's JP in the mid-pack. I'm the mid-pack maven. You know, whatever. I got this. I can flow with it.
Okay. Cool. Challenge accepted. All right. So today we're going to be discussing Three Dark Crowns by Kendare Blake. But before we get into that, I wanted to go over a little bit of news. We don't have a lot today, just two main things. The first thing was I read about Sarah Maas, SJM. She's officially become the top-selling author of the year so far. Not like fantasy, but just top-selling author of the year. She released that third Crescent City book in January, which is The House of Flame and Shadow, which I've not read the Crescent City series. I started it and then read that apparently you were supposed to read Throne of Glass first, and then I stopped it. I'm like 2 chapters into the first Crescent City book. And so then I read all of Throne of Glass at the beginning of the year, which was great, but emotionally wrecking, and I needed some time before I jumped back into
to recover.
Yeah, I needed a little time to heal before jumping back into Sarah Maas stuff. So I've not gotten back into the Crescent City stuff.
That's fair.
Yeah.
You have to be able to handle that weight, right? You gotta have all your ducks in a row and no projects on the horizon.
No. I mean, especially like those, there's only 3. I say only 3, but they are thick.
They are thick ladies.
Yes. Chunky girls.
Chunky girls.
They're really pretty though. Like I went ahead and got all 3 because I'm like, I know I'm going to want to read them. So I have them.
Is the third one available in paperback yet? That's the only reason I haven't.
I think so, but I'm not sure.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was drawn in by the pretty cover of the third one, like over and over. And I'm like, all right, I'm getting it. I'm getting all 3 then. If I'm getting this one, I'm getting all 3. So,
you know, I think the authors and stuff are starting to catch on about what a reader will do for a good trophy book.
Oh, yeah.
And how much faster we will spend money on multiple copies. They're starting to catch on. It's starting to get pretty painful for, the everyday reader.
It really
to collect their trophies.
Yeah, this is interesting that you're seeing that kind of thing where they're doing these special covers and stuff, because to me it brings back around the 90s in comic books where the comic book companies were figured out that if they could do variant covers, then comic book collectors would go out of their way to collect all 6 variants of the same cover of whatever special issue and stuff like that. And that eventually came back to bite the comics industry in the butt.
Yeah. And I mean, it may with this too, but for now, all these special editions are so pretty.
It's just so pretty.
Give me a scene on the edge, and then give me like all the gilding.
Oh, the sprayed edges. Don't even get me going about sprayed edges.
So pretty.
Pretty. Well, and the rebinders too are, it's a really neat hobby because Jonathan got into it quite a bit, and he dived in pretty hard with that. And there are some makers out there that do really delicate and intricate work. It's really cool to watch them.
Yeah. I'll sit there and watch the little videos on Instagram or whatever, and I'm just like, ooh.
That's a black hole. Yeah.
Yes.
You could do that for hours. I'm like, fully entertained.
Maybe I should start painting some scenes on the edges of some books. Do I need another hobby?
Yes, you do.
Yes, you need all the hobbies.
It's a ton of fun once you get into it. you start to develop different techniques, and sometimes I like to be a little bit more intricate. Other times I just want something very simple. Like I think I did one for Nikki for Iron Flame when, like, after we got those autographed books
Mhm.
from the
Right.
like that whatever the webinar or whatever it was, because we only needed one but we got two, so I was like, well, let me just rebind this one for Nikki, and that turned out pretty cool. Like I was able to, like, I did I do her name on the front or the back in runic? I did it on the front in rune, which was cool, and then a simple single dragon on the back. I don't know. I have I have the materials set aside for the next few in the Empyrean series, so that way they'll all match.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
got to
it'll
look
be
pretty
fun.
on the bookcase. They got to match.
Correct.
Yeah, maybe sometime, maybe next year or something, we'll have to maybe get into some Akatar as a group. The other news thing, before we get too much off, is of course we're going to talk about Carissa Broadbent again, because there's just something new to me. I don't think I'd realized it, but the Ashes of the Star-Cursed King is going to be released on June 4th, which we kind of knew that was coming. But basically the way it's going to break down why there's going to be so many books is each of the houses are going to get a duology, which is kind of cool.
Each of the houses are going to get a duology. Wow. That's
A lot of books. That's how we're going to get
that's
all
a
those
lot
books.
of books. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
All those books we were talking about before were like, last episode, we're like, how are there going to be so many books? That's how. It's like each house is going to get duology. And then my guess, if you get into the story of all of them, there's got to be something to wrap them up then after you release those all to bring it together. So
Sort of like Infinity War.
maybe.
Well, while we're still on the news, that Business Insider article that was talking about Sarah Maas being the author of the year so far, I just think it's interesting and worth pointing out that they go into how romantasy is becoming its own thing and kind of hint that social media has played a large role in the rise of romantasy. However, apparently some of the publishers with their new romantasy imprint lines have also kind of taken a little bit of caution, saying they're not sure and it's unclear if the influencer culture will continue to help romantasy grow or if it's just going to kind of peter out. So I think that's interesting that the publishing industry is being very cautious about not going all in on romantasy.
Well, didn't Sarah J. Maas, like, part of her popularity was get TikTok, right?
It says there's a correlation between the rise of TikTok use in America along with the sales of her book and the rise of like the little TikTok book communities. But obviously you can't prove causation off that. It's just there's correlation between the two. I'm sure they affected each other, but without doing a real study, you can't say there was causation.
Well, I know there's like this book talk where it's like all about books.
Right.
And if you go to a lot of bookstores now, especially independent ones, but even some of the big chain ones, they'll have like sections of like book talk books. Whatever's hot in book talk, it'll be a whole section where you can just go and you don't have to find the book individually. You just go to like the book talk section.
Right. It's not any different than book stores years and years ago, and I guess some of them still do, where they feature prominently as soon as you walk in the store Oprah's book pick of the month or whatever, right?
That's true.
So,
yeah.
I mean, it's the same kind of thing. I just think it's interesting the role that social media has played and that the publishing industry is obviously being a little hesitant to fully embrace it, while the bookstores, the actual marketers, have kind of embraced it wholesale. So it's an interesting dichotomy, I think.
It's like a giant book club. It's
yeah,
like
I mean,
a
what
huge
are
book
your
club.
thoughts, Jonathan, Ashley, Mari? What are your thoughts on book talk? Because I don't do TikTok at all.
I think, as with anything business related, anytime you see like a hockey stick pattern where things surge up, you need to be preparing yourself for an equally violent market correction. So publishers are probably approaching it with caution, with the idea like, hey, it was great. We sold all these books. We got some popular authors on board, got their foot in the door. Everything's going on. If they pull the rug out from underneath them and the whole thing crashes down, they don't want to be over-invested and stuffing the shelves with books that might go stale, or quite honestly, it's what do you do with a warehouse full of books that don't sell?
Do you like the video game industry and the crash in the 80s? You bury them in a landfill in Arizona.
E.T., right?
Right. I think that something that maybe is contributing to this too is it's the big name publishers that are being hesitant about it. because my understanding, none of us are professionals in this industry, but like my understanding is a lot of romantasy authors get big independently, do independent publishing. And so I think there's a little bit of a shift in power from the big publishers having all the control to independent, like smaller, the authors, honestly, having more control over their own works. I think it was on Blue Sky, maybe it was on Threads. I follow Katie Roberts, and she was saying how she felt so much less burned out when she was doing independent publishing. She's, very, very prolific right now. She's traditionally published now, but she's also very burnt out. So I wonder how much of it is this like power struggle between independent publishing and traditional publishing.
Part of that independent publishing right now is in today's age, it's so much easier to access.
Yes.
And you can prove yourself with an ebook faster and say, hey, there's a market. We're selling ebooks here. Now we can go and print and make that transition over into print that way. Whereas in the past, maybe you were doing print and then later developing an ebook. So paper books still hold the lion's share of the market, like 2/3 of the market right now. But ebooks are definitely advancing.
Yeah, and I know that like some of the independent authors that I like follow on social media were talking about how the big benefit of publishing traditionally used to be that they would push all the advertising. They would push the book for you. And nowadays, even when you're traditionally published, you're expected as an author to also have a newsletter, have a website, do social media, push your own book. And so there's less and less of a benefit of going the traditional publishing route and more staying independent. If you can get big, if you can get your name out there,
There's bound to be some sort of financial stability if you can connect with a publishing house. For instance, a publishing house might advance you monies in order to write the next copy, but you can kind of make them become attracted to you as opposed to you kind of hunting them down through social media like TikTok. TikTok democratizes the process of marketing. Like they kind of stripped the algorithm away and gave everybody a level playing field and was like, if it trends, it trends. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And let the people vote on what they want to see and how they want to interact with that content and see how things shake out. And I don't think that publishing houses have that type of clout on TikTok. It just leads to a very interesting POV.
I agree. It's an interesting potential change in how, books are being published.
I said we saw the same thing with the music industry before, right? The big publishing companies in the music business pushed hard against digital music. And so you ended up with things like Napster. And then eventually, as digital music became the norm and it got easier and easier to produce your own music, much like, writing and self-publishing a book got easier with electronic books, we have now musical artists that literally come out of their garage into the top selling, slots on the digital music sales. Like Billie Eilish, recorded her entire album, in her bedroom, got a platinum record. That wouldn't have happened in the 80s.
Right.
And so I think, maybe we're seeing the same exact thing happen in book publishing that we saw happen in the music industry.
Agreed. Once you open up Pandora's box with social media and self-publishing and you prepare the pathway for the authors and lyricists, you can't stuff it back in.
Well, every business, it seems like they become entrenched in their business model. And if they can't change it, they end up, becoming Kodak. And the problem is the big conglomerate of the entire industry always pushes back. So the movie industry pushed back against VHS and home tapes and lost. They pushed back against home sales of electronic media. The music industry pushed back against digital music. So every time they've tried to push back against an emerging technology, it never goes well. They always end up losing, and you'd think they would learn the lesson that it's better to just quickly embrace and adapt to something like that rather than try and spend so much effort trying to put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah. I think the bigger you are, the bigger the business is, the bigger you are, the harder it is to turn. The bigger, the harder it is to change and to pivot and to change your business model. So they do everything they can to keep the market the way it is as long as possible. It's in their best interest.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, Mario's absolutely correct. A lot of that comes down to once you get so large, it's not just one person at the top making a decision. It becomes a board and things have to be voted on.
All right, so enough of the news. Now back into the actual book review. So once again, we're going to be talking about Three Dark Crowns by Kendare Blake. And we chose this book for two reasons. First of all, because it's another author that's going to be at the Fabled Fantasy Romantasy book event in October in Orlando. And also because May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And the author, Kendare Blake, is Korean American. So thought we'd pick her. All right, so I'm going to go into a little bit of a synopsis. This is the synopsis that is on Amazon. So I'll read it and then we'll talk about it a little bit. In every generation on the island of Fennbirn, a set of triplets is born. 3 queens, all equal heirs to the crown, and each possessor of a coveted magic. Mirabella is a fierce elemental, able to spark hungry flames or vicious storms at the snap of her fingers. Catherine is a poisoner, one who can ingest the deadliest poisons without so much as a stomachache. Arsinoe, a naturalist, is said to have the ability to bloom the reddest rose and control the fiercest of lions. But becoming the queen, crowned, isn't solely a matter of royal birth. Each sister has to fight for it, and it's not just a game of win or lose. It's life or death. The night the sisters turn 16, the battle begins. The last queen standing gets the crown. This book was published in September 20th, 2016. So it's another one that's been around for a while. All right, so now we're going to go into the little bit of the non-spoilery overview, general star rating of what we think. And then later on, we'll get into the spoiler part. So, Jonathan, what do you think?
Of the book, no spoilers, right? Of
Right.
the just general of the book.
I was going to say, we have big feelings.
Yes, please, no spoilers.
No spoilers in this one section of it. Let me see if I can clean this up. Okay, what did I think? I'll give a general here. I spent a majority of the time angry and confused at the book. I thought that the structure was pretty cool. I thought that the concept was pretty cool, but there were some things that I got hung up on very early in the book that then that drove confusion in me. And then as the story progressed, at one point I got really upset, like outbursty angry. Like I didn't throw anything, but I was like texted Ashley right when I heard it. I gave her like an exclamation of rage. It evolved in that direction. So overall, I'm sad to say that this story didn't click with me.
Okay.
I thought
I feel
the
like your
concept
brain was
there.
working really hard.
Oh,
on this
it
one.
was, yeah.
There
It was
were-
definitely, it was low
it
on
was a big
oil.
world
It
for
was
Jonathan.
smoking. There was,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on inside of my.
It was
inside
working.
of my
There were a
scalp.
lot of names. Names are not his forte. And there was a lot of, who's this person again? But this person is queen. And I'm like, no. And like trying to redirect and bullet point for him. Maybe if seeing it on the page made it a little bit easier for me. But yeah, I feel like you were not a fan of this one just because it made you work harder, I think.
There was a lot. There was runoff, and then some of the names were already tied to other characters from different things in my mind. So, like as far as names, Katarine, and then Katarina, and then Mirabella, and Madrigal. So it's like, oh, you know where I'm going with that? Like I'm looking for Bruno next, right? And
We don't talk about Bruno.
There's so many things when we get into the spoilery section, I'll go deeper into like where some of the other things threw me off and then where that anger lies. And I'll tell you right now, a lot of the confusion and anger, I blame Kelly for, and I'll tell you about that later.
Ooh.
When we get to the spoilery section, but it'll make sense. It's not in a bad way, Kelly. It's just like you can wear it as a badge of honor.
So how many stars would you give it?
2.
Okay.
Sadly, 2.
Brutal.
So I say this with it's the kindest 2 that I've ever given in our long, what are we, episode 3, 4? The longest history. This is definitely a kind 2. Like I was rooting for this book and it didn't do it. This kick sailed wide right for me.
Kelly?
Overall, I thought it was about a 3. There was some good parts of the story where it seemed to gel really well, and then there were a few parts that were, like Jonathan said, that got you really aggravated at, especially at what some of the characters did. But you had to, I think part of the problem was I had to keep in mind the three queens, they're teenagers. So yeah, they're not exactly going to be doing the smartest thing. I know I didn't do the smartest thing when I was a teenager. So I kind of have to let a lot of that not doing the smart thing, kind of keeping in mind that they're just teenagers. The characters are just teenagers. I like where the book kind of went, even if it was a little predictable. But I think there was a lot of room for more character development. I think that the author kind of teased a character development and then shut it down sometimes. So that kind of took it away a little bit for me.
Okay. All right. Ash, what do you think?
I think the boys are tough on this one. I was entertained. I'm still scouring to get book 2 on Libby. Like, I might have faked an address on Libby to try to get this next book. I liked it a lot. It was a big world. There were a lot of names. There was some politics. There was, some sprinkling of religion. I really liked the concept of it. I'm excited to see where the series goes, because this is not a duology or a trilogy. I think there's like 5 books in this series.
Yeah.
So I am still clamoring to get the second book. So this one it's not Sarah J. Maas, right? Like that's a hard hill to climb for anybody. I think that's a hard hill for Sarah. But I mean, I was entertained. This was a 4 for me. I'm glad I read it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Ash. Like, for me, it's a 4. It's a very strong 4. And I feel that once I read the series, what I do is I rate the series overall rather than individual books once I've read it all. I feel like once I read the series, it has a very strong potential to be a 5-star for me. I am also awaiting trying to read the sequel. I'm 2 weeks out on Libby, so I'm on a wait list on Libby for the audiobook. I couldn't get on for the regular book, but I'm like a 2 week out for the audiobook, so that I can't wait for that. I wanted to know more. Initially when it first started, I was a little confused and overwhelmed by all the characters, because you have each of the 3 would-be queens, and then you have all the people in each of their courts, and you have to try and remember the relationships and where they're at in the middle of the action before it goes to another chapter with another court, and then 2 chapters later you go back to the one you were at. So it took a bit of concentration, and on my part it also took a little bit of just letting go of, I'm not going to remember all these characters. If they're important, I'll figure it out as I go along. I remembered the 3 main chickies and a few main people in their lives, but I would say that the character development for me was very well done. I felt like all 3 of the main characters are different at the end than they were at the beginning. There was some movement. I feel like the plot moved pretty quickly. There was never a part where I was bored. And yeah, I immediately wanted to read the sequel.
Immediately.
Mm-hmm.
It was like midnight.
Yeah.
And I was scrambling. I was trying to figure out. I was like, what do you mean it's not on Kindle Unlimited? I was not emotionally prepared for that. There was scrambling.
I was not ready.
No.
Agreed. Anything else before we move on to the spoiler part?
Nope, bring on the spoilers.
Kelly, you want to do our little spoiler bit?
Sure. So, dear listener, from this point forward, we will be discussing spoilers. So if you have not read the book, or you want to read it later and don't want to be spoiled, I suggest you skip to the end of the show, or take a pause right now, stop, go read the book, and then come back and listen when you're ready to get spoiled.
Spoil me, Kelly.
Get spoiled.
All right, so I gotta know then the spoilery part, Jonathan. What was the?
I was so mad. I hate when he does this, you guys. I was so mad.
This sounds like a relationship problem.
She's
mad.
Little bit.
She's mad because I was right.
No, I'm mad because I was, and it doesn't make sense. I was so much further along than he was. And he made a comment and I was like, well, that's not unreasonable. But it was just the fact that he was right. And I was so mad. It's just, you think too much. You do too much, sir. Just sit down. Just enjoy the book a little bit. Don't. Don't
I
get it
could.
right all the time. And he was right. I was so mad.
Oof. So it's Kelly's fault. So here's how it ties to Kelly. A while back, Kelly said, yeah, he broke apart the names of characters. And so then that kind of like that seed planted in the back of my mind.
The
So
arsenic seed?
yeah. So I'm sitting there like listening to the book and they're like arsenoid, arsenoid, arson. I couldn't keep the characters straight because every time I would hear arsenoid, I would think poison, right? And they're like, so I would get stuck and be like, you know what, Ashley, it doesn't sound like this is a poison, that this is what's she supposed to be? The natural
Naturalist.
character or natural.
Right, she was the naturalist.
Yeah, I was like, that doesn't. I would tell I'm struggling with this because I keep hearing her as the poisoner, and I don't understand why. And I'm just like, so I'm just stuck on it. And then like that last page where
Slaps
everything.
you in the face.
Yeah, I was like, I texted her. I was like, I was right. I knew it. So mad.
You're mad. I was mad because he said it like the day that I was about to finish, and like it was not in. It wasn't a foreign concept for me. But again, I am admittedly a dumb reader. I am here for a good time, not for a long time. I want to be entertained.
Yes.
I want to be surprised, and he figured it out again, and he does this all the time.
You got to give it context. Ashley finished the book like 2 weeks before me or whatever it is. Like
I've been done
read
for a
it.
minute.
She was done for a while. When you guys were like, hey, we're about ready to start reading this, I was like, oh, dang, Ashley's done.
I saw on Goodreads. I'm like, oh.
I was entertained, you guys. I had an opening. I wasn't already reading something. I dived right in. It took me like 4 days. Well, and it helps that it was like on the phone, right? Because when you're audiobooking it or like a physical book, then you're limited. But man, put that on a blue screen and your girl will stay up and get it finished. There were a few late nights that week. I don't think either I was emotionally prepared for all the perspectives. Like when you read the back of the book, the synopsis of the book, it talks about one queen, that, and that the sister thing and everything. But I didn't know we were getting all three perspectives.
Right.
I was like, I was sold. I needed to know what was going on with all of them. It was hard to put it down for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was well written in the plot and story aspect as far as keeping you somewhat engaged. But like Jonathan, not even halfway through the book, I was pretty much decided that the naturalist was definitely a poisoner in disguise.
I think my thing about, part of it is that, like Ash, I am an immersion reader. Like I'm not trying to figure it out unless it's a murder mystery that I'm actively reading. For the most part, I'm not trying to figure it out too hard. I just kind of want to be along for the ride. So I wasn't thinking about it too deeply that way. And so, yeah, it surprised me at the end. I wasn't.
Well, it's not like I was, trying to dissect, what are the character names? Let me write them down and dissect what they could possibly mean. It's just reading it. I was like, well, why would you name a character that?
Yes, exactly.
They gave no. They gave an explanation and I fell for it. They were like some other queen, the strongest one. I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Ashley the sucker was fully bamboozled.
Unless I missed it, they don't really tell you how they chose their powers. Like, I know that they were separated when they were 6 years old.
It's said in the book that the mother of the triplets knows, like that. Right. She just knows. So it was hand waved as just the mother knows. So did the mother make a mistake? Was there a switched at birth scenario going on? Or was the mother wrong?
Because the mother was a poisoner.
What bothers me? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what bothers me the most about this book is Jules. Jules being the strongest naturalist that, they've seen in how long, and Jules being born or conceived at the same time as the triplets. I don't know if their birthday is the same. Forgive me, I'm forgetting now. But like conceptually, double pun there. They were conceived at the same time, the triplets and Jules, it was Beltane, right?
Yeah. So
I'm wondering what that twist is. There, and we see such a huge perspective of Jules, POV, the guy who may or may not be important long term. So for me, And, the talk of the years where there's 4 born, or the years, the white-handed queen because there's 4 born, or whatever like that. I think Jules is more important than we know.
Yeah.
I just don't know what the tie-in is.
I thought when they put a mask on Arsenault, I thought Jules was going to be impersonating Arsenault.
You know what? That probably would have gone smoother.
Yeah. I was like, oh, this is where this is going. And then it didn't. And I'm like, oh, uh-oh.
That was a missed opportunity, guys. That would have been far less destructive.
Yeah.
I didn't see Zombie Bear coming, though, that's for sure.
You didn't have that on your little bingo card? Fantasy elements. What do we think, guys? Kelly?
I think there was some interesting fantasy elements. The whole idea of the 3 queens, trying to murder each other is interesting. What I thought was interesting is this whole concept that they're on this island and that there's a mainland. And the people were coming to this island like through the mist. Mm-hmm. It described it that way several times when the dude, I can't remember his name, but the dude who came back from exile that tried to run away.
Joseph.
Yeah, Joseph, when he came back from exile and he talked about they came through the mist. I was just like, well, where do you go when you go somewhere and it's described like that? It's usually like going to the Fae, right? You're going to an enchanted world or another world.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about like on the mainland, nobody has magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it really brings up an interesting question of how is this island different? Because it's obviously different from whatever the mainland is.
Right.
So I think that's an interesting fantasy element. And it's kind of weird, though, that of the 3 powers that they talked about, the most was the naturalist, the elementalist, and the poisoner. And they mentioned there were people with the war gift and the insight gift?
Mm-hmm.
Oracle
gift.
Yeah.
So, but they didn't really have any characters, prominent that had those gifts. So that was kind of interesting that the 3 that are the most powerful groups are the poisoner, elementalist, and naturalist, which are 3 things very much tied into the earth, right? The poison is stuff that comes from the earth, grows in the earth. The naturalist makes all the animals and plants grow, and the elementalist obviously controls the weather and the elemental forces of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas war and oracle are not so much tied into an actual land, right?
It's not physical.
Right. So it's just interesting the choices there and how the poisoner. I was also kind of thought it was interesting how the poisoners seem to be in control of everything, and it would set up as a conflict between the group of poisoners controlling the council and this religious group trying to wrest control away. And so I thought about like, well, this religious group is basically willing to stop at nothing to wrest control away. So what exactly are they willing to do? Is one of the things that they would be willing to do is to, when the 3 babies, the 3 princesses are born to be queens, did they switch them? Did they switch them with somebody else? Did they switch them with commoners? Did they switch? We talked about like Jules. Is Jules really the queen? And they switched another naturalist gifted baby with her, or something like that, so that they were trying to dilute the poisoner and the naturalist powers in the queen, so that the elementalist would obviously be the strongest one and win, so that they would get control back away from the poisoners. So there's a lot of interesting possibilities as far as the fantasy elements all together, the religion element and all this, and the subterfuge and all of that going on. So it was a very interesting fantasy world that was created.
What would you rate it?
I think the fantasy elements, it was really solid. I liked it. So I would say it's definitely a solid 4.
That's high praise.
Yeah.
What did you think, Jonathan?
Ooh, I did like the fantasy elements. I think that's why I had hoped so much for this book. It could stand for a curveball. Besides what, there's a rule of 3, and then something's not quite what it seems is at play, which is cool and all, but having that 4th sister curveball would be real awesome. So for this, high hopes for the series, but I'm not holding out for it. Overall, in the fantasy elements, maybe a 3.5. I want to go to a 3.5. Hey, Ash, did you give
No, I'm
your...
here.
Okay.
Oh no, I was just waiting my turn, patiently waiting my turn.
Oh, it's a virtue. Go ahead.
Fantasy was a 4 for me. Again, I was entertained. Like Kelly, I thought the island versus mainland concept was interesting. Kelly pointed out, Joseph's explanation of, crossing through the mist in the water, but it was Billy's explanation. Is that his name? Do they call him Billy?
I think they called him Billy, yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
I
he's
don't
introduced
remember.
as William, but they called him Billy.
I don't
think
remember who it was.
Arsinoe teased him and called him Junior, so that stuck with me. But like he would explain that when he was young and sailing, he sailed the same waters and never happened to cross the island, right? So it sounds like you need someone from the island to find it, or the island needs to like accept you or something. So for that, I thought that part was interesting. I'm not sure if the third sister or the fourth sister is going to be the curveball that we see, most specifically because they talk about the triplets coloring quite a lot, right? Black hair, black eyes, black hair, black eyes. If you're a queen, you have black hair and black eyes. And I don't believe that Jules has that coloring. But I think it does have something to do with the night that she was conceived or what her birthday is, if it happens to be the same as the triplets. Maybe the goddess of old, or whoever it is that their deity is playing a trick that way, or there's some prophecy that we've yet to find out about. The switch out makes sense, but I think that's a little bit too predictable, and we don't have the coloring. Like her coloring's not in the same favor, so that part I don't know what it is, but the Jules thing is a curveball. It's coming. We got to figure it out. But the magic was fun. I don't know that I've ever considered the art of poisoning a magic. So that was a new perspective for me, especially the eating it and thriving off of it. That threw me for a loop. But the familiars, the naturalists, the elementals, I thought that was really cool. I think we're going to see something about, the trait or the magic that was mentioned but hasn't been seen for a long time. The war planning, the oracle stuff, and maybe that's what our fourth one is, because we very obviously have a naturalist. It's just not one of the triplets. We very obviously have an elemental and very obviously have a poisoner. So I'm curious to see how that is ultimately going to play out. Also, I think I would like a familiar. So for me, it was a 4.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say for me, it was also definitely a 4, pretty strong 4. I think there was enough variety in the magic. The magic worked together well that it didn't make me question things. There's a lot of things I do have questions about, but I don't think it's because it's a bad magic system. I think it's because you just don't know, because it hasn't been revealed in the plot.
Mm-hmm.
I think the mist is almost a character in and of itself. Like, is someone controlling it? Because not only does it not let people through, but it didn't let Arsinoe out.
Oh, it doesn't let them out.
Yeah.
The queen's out.
Right.
That's an interesting point.
Like, it's almost like it has its own consciousness. It makes me think of that 60s TV show, The Prisoner. I know Kelly loves this show. Have either of you guys seen The Prisoner or heard of The Prisoner?
Mm-mm.
There's this...
The rover.
Yeah, the rover.
The rover will get you if you try to escape.
You try to escape the island, this giant white bubble gets you, and then you wake up and you're back on the island or wherever you are. Yeah, the mist is definitely... It made me wonder, like, is someone still actively controlling it, or is it just a set spell on the land, or is it its own consciousness? And then that made me think about some of the things that happened. If the mist can do that, can it do other things? Can it influence things? Because I gotta say, when Mirabella and Joseph got together by the beach, it felt very much like almost a dream-like situation. Like it was almost a compulsion. You know what I mean? Like they almost like they didn't have their own choices that they were making.
So what you're saying is 2 horny teenagers, one of whom is soaking wet and getting out of wet clothes to prevent from getting frozen. That was magical that something happened.
Well, I thought it was magic. I just thought it was because Arsinoe burned the bracelet or whatever that she was making that first time with magical.
Yeah.
Remember, she didn't complete the ritual. She was just like, oh, this is a bad idea. I'm freaking out. I'm going to burn this. And so I thought that the Joseph and what's her name was the outcome of that.
Right. I thought that her burning the the hair bracelet thing, that was what was going to make Joseph fall out of love with her.
With Jules.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was supposed to be Joseph and Jules. They grew up together. They were supposed to be, together forever.
But the ritual wasn't completed.
Right.
And so Arsinoe tossed it in the fire.
Right.
So there's consequence, right? Even though it wasn't completed, the magic was still imbued in there.
Right.
Is how I processed it.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too. And as for any potential switcheroo or whatever, I think it's possible that the religious group or somebody switched the triplets around, but maybe not with somebody else. Maybe not with Jules. I think they switched Catherine and Arsinoe. I think they, whatever the switcheroo happened, either they did it or for some reason we don't know yet, the queen, the mom, said it wrong on purpose for some reason.
Mucked it up.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Because I agree, and my thought right now is still that even though there's a lot of other possibilities that could happen, is that Catherine and Arsinoe were the ones that were switched.
Yes.
Catherine is actually a naturalist because it explains how she survived getting thrown into the bottomless pit as she's as she's falling down, because she came back and she was all cut up by brambles and stuff like that. So she gets thrown in as a survival instinct. She makes all the brambles and branches grow up and catch her.
Yeah.
So that she doesn't fall to her death.
Yeah, I didn't get that until Kelly said it.
I kind of took that away from the description of how she looked and everything, and what could be the only possible way that she survived getting thrown into the bottomless pit.
Yeah.
I was definitely surprised that she survived.
Oh, yeah, me too.
At no point did I think that throughout the book did I think that Arsinoe or Katarine didn't have magic powers. I really early on in the book sensed that somebody pulled the old switcheroo and now their magic isn't aligned. And so, but there was they alluded to like having weaker queens, that kind of like fake it till you make it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was that poison. Like, so Katarine she was just developing some sense of tolerance to poisons throughout the story. And, there was actually no movement for Arsinoe in the naturalist side of things. So it's like, I kind of want to say that the weakest of all the sisters is Weather Gal. What's her name?
Mirabella.
Channel 6 News.
Mirabella.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the Channel 6 News. You're so bad.
I think she's the weakest one, although she's publicly the strongest one. And I think her greatest weakness is going to come down to longing for familial relationships that she's never going to find.
So Kelly and I were talking about this earlier, and Kelly was asking if you had to support one of the queens, how did you word it, Kelly?
The question is, if you were in this world and you were asked which of these three queens do you support, which would it be? Because it's obvious that the everyday common person who didn't necessarily have a lot of powers was going to support one of the queens. And then there was the whole political thing where like the naturalists were like, well, if we can't support our queen because she's too weak or whatever, or she gets killed, then we want the elementalists because we hate the poisoners. There was a lot of elements of the whole, like, which of these queens do you support or would you, support in this book? So it's an interesting question to say as someone who's read the book now, at least as far as we've gotten, which of these three queens would you personally be supporting?
Are we basing our answers off of like before we read the book or after we read the book?
I mean, yeah, it'd be kind of hard to take away any of the knowledge you have now.
Like an Etch-a-Sketch, they just shake me around. So, I'm hopeful for Arsinoe. I think that a lot of the story is centered around her. So I think that she's if it doesn't shake out that she's the one, then I think I've been set up for failure. Stranger things have happened, but something's pulling me in her direction. Katarine doesn't strike me as the dark horse coming out, and Channel 6 strikes me as the clear favorite. And whenever it's the clear favorite, it's never the obvious one. Like, it's never like you don't watch the murder mystery and the guy who you walked into, like the husband isn't always the one. You know what I mean? Like, she's had every advantage. She that's gonna be her greatest downfall, is her perceived strength.
So you're going with Arsinoe, right? Sinui, you would root for. What about you, Kelly?
So I think initially I would have said Ursino because she seemed probably the best person, the person who was the most benevolent at heart. But as the story went on, I just really kind of felt a little bit more supportive of Catherine. I liked her story a little bit more. I liked the development in her character more. I think she grew on me more than any of the other characters did, the other queens did.
What about you, Ash?
So I think Jonathan's wrong. And I'm sorry, husband.
Shocking.
I love you. It's shocking. I think we're gonna see
Bold move, though. It's definitely a bold move, given my track
I'm
history.
throwing it out there because he's always right and it drives me nuts. No, but I think, to Kelly's point, Arsinoe gets a lot of face time, right? And I think Mirabella is the currently all-powerful, the current favorite. I think she's got some older sister syndrome that's going to be what cripples her.
Is she
So
the
I think
oldest?
she definitely has like the protective, kumbaya, we should be a family, we should be looking at, I don't want to kill my sisters, perspective. She remembers them as children. She remembers wanting to keep them safe and protect them. She remembers Arsinoe being the one that pushed. She remembers, Katarine being the one that would cry and be the emotional one. So to me, I fully acknowledged and felt a resemblance to like that big sister syndrome. So I think we're going to see Mirabella back down and defer to her sisters. I think Arsinoe is going to make a play for it, but cave at the end because she knows what it's like to be in a family and she's going to accept her sisters. So I think they're both going to end up supporting. Is it Catherine or Katarine? Jonathan, you're the one that heard. You're the only one that heard.
Oh, I thought it was Catherine. It looked like it was spelled Catherine.
I thought it was
in the book.
Catherine too, but he corrected me a couple times in conversation.
So the audiobook refers to her as Katarine, but I guess I should be super clear about where I stand on pronunciations. If I hear it as, if they pronounce it as Katarine and I say it as Katarine, that doesn't mean you have to read it as Katarine.
No, but I want to get it out. Like, I want to do diligence to the author too, so I wanted to respect that. But the pronunciation aside, I think if we already see an elemental, we already see a naturalist in Jules, whether or not she's part of the triplets and actually a quadruplet, or if we're talking about some other kind of magic at play, we see an elemental, we see a naturalist, we see at the end a poisoner in Arsinoe. I think Catherine is something different or something more. And I think that's going to be our big plot twist.
Okay.
And I think she's the one that's the most damaged.
Oh, she's definitely damaged.
100%.
Yeah,
Right?
I agree with that.
She had no love. She had minimal family. There were no, hugs, and there was no sibling in the way that the other two had, because even Mirabella had it on her side.
Mm-hmm.
She grew up, with a family. She grew up with someone her age. And so I think we're going to see some growth from her. I think we're going to see some revenge out of her with how the last one ended. But she's the only one with an undefined power.
So you think her? That's who you would go?
I think it's her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I initially, I like Arsinoe. The character, she seems like an interesting person. And at the beginning, I like a little bit of how resourceful she is, how willing she is to do whatever to get what she wants. But I think that can be very dangerous with a lot of power. Like a person in power, a person who's willing to do whatever to get what they want, can go really bad. And kind of the same thing with Mirabella. I like Mirabella, but I would be hesitant to support her because she's been so tied to the religious group for so long and hasn't seemed to see their manipulations or care that she's being manipulated. So to me, Catherine has a really interesting storyline, and at the towards the end, where she's just comes back like a ghoul from the dead, and Peter pushed her in. she is a wrathful spirit, ready to like kick butt and take names and chew bubblegum and be out of bubblegum. Like, I
Does
really...
anybody have theories why he did that? I don't think my brain processed the why of that.
I think he was paid to do it. I think that's why he was there. I think he was there. He was being used.
Hmm.
In my opinion, his whole point of being there was to get rid of her. I don't know why though. Like, I don't know who hired him or who put him there. And I do believe what he said, that he wasn't supposed to fall in love with her. Well, he says he fell in love with her, but then he murderized her anyway, or attempted to. So yeah, I think that was his whole point of being there, was he was supposed to do something like that.
He doesn't know she survived.
Correct.
He
Not
thinks
yet, no.
he thinks he did what he was supposed to do and moved along.
Mhm.
So the other thing here to think about maybe is like, if they had to do something to trigger who she was, maybe he's in the know. Maybe they were just like, hey, this is a stretch. This is a real big stretch. But maybe the puppet master pulled him aside and said, hey, listen, it's time for us to play our hand. And this is what you have to do.
Or maybe, pie in the sky, maybe they'll rule together. Maybe they don't have to kill each other.
Like a family.
Yeah.
Probably not. That's
No.
not how fantasy
No.
works.
How messed up is it at 16 to be like, hey, go kill your sisters?
Well, and that they're groomed that way.
Right, that's the
Yeah.
thing. They're not just like, oh, I have to kill my sister. I know I have to do that. It's they've been told that they have to do that from what, the age of 6?
Yeah.
If not before then, they pull them apart at the age of 6 so that it potentially, hopefully there's not a lot of memory there, right?
Right.
So that's pretty screwed up. That should screw up anybody
Mm-hmm.
being yanked from, the family that you have.
Right, but going back to why Peter pushed Catherine into the chasm, I think it's some of what Jonathan was saying. I think he was sent in to try and see if he can't, hey, go in there, see if you can bring Catherine up to speed, make her a viable option to keep the poisoners in control, and if you don't, then dispose of her.
Or he's a plant from the religious sect, because didn't he claim to dislike his new stepmother because she was
Right.
like super into the church thing?
Yeah. So it's possible. There's a lot of options, but I don't think it was just a whim that he did that. I think there was
no.
definitely a plan for why
Yeah.
he did that.
Plans
That
within
felt like
plans.
a full 180 to me. I didn't see that coming. I saw a couple things coming. I saw the potential switch. I didn't see zombie bear.
No.
But, A for effort there. I was thoroughly entertained.
Wait.
What are you talking about? A zombie bear?
Romance. Romance is next. I'll go first on romance. I haven't gone first yet. For me, romance is a 3, and it's a very low 3. And the reason is, even though you have a potentially romantic entanglement for each of the main would-be queens, I didn't trust any of them. Peter says he loves Katharina, but he pushed her off into a hole. And Joseph and Mirabella seemed like this little love thing going on, or at least lust, but I also, like I said, it seemed also like some sort of magical enchantment that came over them. Like, their connection is so all-consuming every time they see each other that it almost seems like they lose the ability to make their own choices. Like, there's some outside force that's making it happen. And so the only one that I feel that might be like true romance is Arsinoe and Billy. Especially when he went towards the end and just bowed to her. I was like, ooh. So for me, there was some romance in there. I don't trust it. I don't know if it was full romance, because at this point, the way that this story ended, I almost don't trust anything I read, and I want to know more. Ash, what do you think?
Romance was a 2 for me. There might have been some sexy stuff, and I think we've seen a lot of really powerful friendship love, if not devotion, but it wasn't romantic to me. I don't feel that anything Joseph did with either woman or Billy, I don't think it was romantic as much as it was devotion. And I don't know if Arsinoe and Billy are going to end up together, but I think she impacted him in a positive way. I think he grew because of her. And that says something about his character. This was very, very minimal romance, though, for me.
Kelly?
Yeah, I agree with Ashley. I think the romance was the two, very minimal. There was a lot of young lust between teenagers, but it seemed like there was going to be with Peter and Catherine until he threw her into the pit. So you question yourself, was he just playing the game all along, or did he actually have some kind of romantic feelings for her, but in the end had to do the bidding of whoever? I don't think there was a whole lot of romance, of real romance.
Jonathan?
Yeah, it's a total 2 for me as well. I really think for me, the only way to save the romance in this series is to like heat it up with Jules and Arsinoe. I think that could be the saving romantasy for the series for me. What was there was interesting. It seemed dirty and backhanded. Like, it's a 2. Didn't do it for me.
Okay. What about Spice Guys?
It was like paprika. It just made the top look a little dainty. That's all.
So you're giving it like a 1 for Spice?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Kelly?
I would probably go with a 1 or a 1.5. There was the whole thing at the beach, and it seems to be that was pretty much it.
Ash?
I guess in my brain, I'm trying to separate the romance versus the spice. The beach scenes seem spicy, but I don't feel like it went into a lot of detail. Yeah, I think the spice for me was like a 1.
Yeah, I agree. For me, the Spice was a 1 as well, which, I mean, it is a YA book. Like, it's the category that it's marked on Amazon is 14 to 17-year-olds. So, I mean, I think it's spice appropriate for the age category that it's supposed to be for. So I would say a 1. Yeah, spice for me too.
Yeah, that's a perfect age range for this book. Hey, you 16-year-olds, you think your life is hard.
You think you had it hard. So let's go over the cover. The cover art was designed by Aurora Parlagreco, and then it was digitized by John Dismukes. There is an interview with Aurora Parlagreco that we'll include in the show notes where she talks about coming up with it. What do you think about the cover? I guess describing the cover, it's the one that's black and it has the 3 crowns on it.
I mean, it's pretty simple as far as it being representative of what's actually in the book. I mean, I guess there's 3 queens, there's 3 different crowns, but it doesn't really tell you much. You'd have to actually read the inside cover flap or the back to get a better idea of what's going on. Because for all you know, it could be 3 dudes, it could be 3 demons, it could be anything.
3 different countries.
Right. So, as far as the cover art representing what was in the book, this is probably like a 1.
Ash, what do you think?
I like the cover a lot. Actually, I was sitting here staring at it. I don't think I paid a ton of attention to it in the ebook, right? We very quickly bypass that as digital readers often. So, I mean, in really looking at it today, I liked it a lot. Yeah, it's super simple. I actually think it would make a really good spine, like on your trophy shelf. But I also, like in my deep dive, of course, I found more covers, which irritates my husband to no extent. And that's part of the joys of my life. Stuff down your growling. But to Kelly's point, I think that maybe these are the UK covers. And so there are different covers for each queen, each crown, and what they released once upon a time, possibly overseas. I'm seeing a UK sticker price on this. And on those covers, it says 3 sisters, 1 throne, a fight to the death. And then it's, that queen's crown with the title and the author on there. And so I think those are really, really beautiful with each, representation of the magic on the crown. But I don't dislike it. I think the simple one that we have on our Kindles is super nice. That's a 3.5 for me. I don't know that I would have passed it without picking it up, if that makes sense.
I mean, I don't dislike the cover. It's just I don't think it really gives you a good insight about what's in the book.
You would have passed it in the bookstore.
I would have totally passed it in the bookstore.
I would have been like, ooh, shiny crowns.
Jonathan?
Must see.
I liked simplicity. but I think there's of the three crowns on the cover, only one really aligns to me with the queen, the like Katarine's crown. When you get to the Channel 6, it's just fire, right? And then Arson. Oh wait, sorry. Uh, see, this is where I get confused again, right? So back to the Arsinoe. So it's Arsinoe's crown on the cover, which is like the naturalist, so the wildlife and stuff like that. That kind of pokes out, and then Channel 6 is just fire on there, and then the poison crown has snakes on it, and that's venom. That's not poison. Those are two different things. But then now I'm stuck with trying to figure out like each word has a letter that stands apart. So like in 3, it's the R, and then the D in dark, and then the O in crowns. But then at the top, Kendare's name, the K, stands out. So I've got DORK, and I think it holds true.
Dork.
I'm gonna, yeah. No, I think the art's cool.
All right. For me, the cover was beautiful, and I absolutely would have stopped and picked it up and looked at it. And I think
it's very much your aesthetic.
Yeah, it's absolutely like it's got almost that art gallery or like fancy jewelry store or royal jewelry display, like museum, where you have this very clean black background, and then you have the one piece on highlight on display. Yeah, so I really liked it visually. I would have been drawn to it to at least pick it up and look at it. And I think that it very much relates to what's in the book. You have 3 crowns. The top one is the, naturalist crown. You have the greenery and the purple flower. The middle one has the fire in it for the elemental magic. And then the bottom one has the snakes, which is like Katrina's little pet coral snake. For me, it was a 5. Like, I don't think I could have done anything better with this. Yeah, I really liked it.
Wow, we really ran the gamut of ratings on that.
And then the last question, the all-important question, is it a kissing book?
Nope.
No.
Agreed. Solid no. It's a wonderful book. Obviously, I want to know more. But I think that if the little bit of romance that's in it wasn't in it, I don't think it would have changed anything. I don't think anyone did anything out of love, necessarily. Any big things in the plot were tied to romance,
I think that the only thing you could say as far as things were done out of romance was, initially Arsinoe trying to make sure that Jules was set up. What's his name? That was Joseph that was exiled.
Right.
So there was that. But for this book by itself, no, it is not romantasy. Now, maybe this series as a whole would become romantasy, but this individual book, no.
I agree. So we're in agreement. All right, not a kissing book. And for our rapid fire question for this session, we will discuss the Dune movie and decide whether or not it's romantasy. Is Dune a kissing book?
Which Dune?
The Dune movie, we'll say the new Dune movie, the one that was released recently in the past few years.
Dune or Dune that we're talking about?
Dune.
So the first one, or the first one and the second movie?
Well, I don't know.
Because the first movie is not the complete story, right?
That's true. The 2 movies equal the first book. So yeah, let's talk about we've all seen both movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's talk about Dune and Dune.
Yeah, I'm going to say I felt it was a kissing story.
I agree with you.
Huh.
Yeah. Hard yes.
We've stumped Kelly. Kelly's
Nope.
Kelly's got feelings.
I'll tell you
why.
why.
More, Kelly. Tell me more.
Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
I disagree. What was in it that made it a romantasy story? There was not a romantic element that if you removed it, it fell apart.
Number 1, for me, the whole reason that Paul Atreides exists is because of Jessica's love for the Duke. She was told to bear a daughter, and she chose to bear a son. In this world, the Bene Gesserits can control whether they have girls or boys. She made the conscious choice to have a son because Duke Leto wanted a son. So she gave him a son out of love. If she hadn't done that, you wouldn't have the Kwisatz Haderach. You wouldn't have the story that you have.
Ooh.
But that's like saying that the book we just talked about, 3 Dark Crowns, is romantasy because the queen that gave birth to the triplets loved her husband.
Okay.
So,
Well,
it's I don't think that that's a fair way to say something is romantasy.
I don't disagree with you, but I would say for me, where it anchors as a romantasy is that Paulie is envisioning Frankie throughout the entire story as being the prophecy of them being together and something evolving in that storyline that hinges on them. Follow me, like the white rabbit. Follow me. And he's stunned by her throughout. Even from their first meeting, he's been dreaming about her and getting these visions, and it feels as though they're destined to be with one another. And then when they arrive at that point in the story, it kind of it anchored it for me.
Paul Atreides was going to end up in the desert with the Fremen regardless of Frankie, because he doesn't even meet her until after he's well established joining with them, right? So their relationship is immaterial to the plot.
I
But
think,
would he have
dreams of her.
invested?
right.
Right. Would he have so heavily invested in crossing the desert, going to the south? Would he have continued to fight so hard as a Fremen, if not his premonitions of her,
Right.
of Chani?
It's like
I
a
don't
chicken
think so.
and egg thing. Yeah.
I don't think so. I think that was immaterial.
Okay, so you say no. I say yes. Jonathan, you said yes.
I said yeah.
Ash, what do you think? Yes? Isn't that what you said? Or-
So I think it's interesting everybody's viewpoint, because Mari and Kelly, you guys know how the series ends, right? Or at least
Right.
this like first section of the series. Knowing the very basic elements that I know, I hate to agree with my husband, though I will agree with Mari. Because he dreams of her, and because that seems a central part to the story, well, at least in the movie, I can't account for the books. I think if she were not present, I think if he had not met her, I don't know that he would have dived into the prophecy in the way that he ultimately did. So for me, it's a kiss. Yeah.
One thing I will add just before anybody actually us, I think at least Kelly and I know that Jessica and Duke Leto were not married. She was his concubine. She was his official concubine. Duke Leto never married. He left it open for power. All right, are we done with rapid fire? We put our guns away.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Of Swords and Soulmates. Before we go, make sure to check the show notes, rate and review us on your podcast app of choice, and follow us on Instagram at Of Swords and Soulmates, or join our Facebook page of Swords and Soulmates. If you'd like to offer a suggestion for a future rapid fire question, reach out to us there. If you'd like to read along with us as we prep for a new episode, follow us on Goodreads at Of Swords and Soulmates. We hope you'll join us in 2 weeks for our next episode when we review Sebastian Nothwell's Oak King, Holly King. See you then.